Everyone, and welcome to our webinar, the ROI of Managed Services for Licensing and Property Tax Compliance. My name is Jasmine Okutsi, and I'll be your host today. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you've joined us before, welcome back. Before we dive in, I'll review a couple of quick notes. Friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal tax advice. The information we'll be discussing today is for informational purposes only. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review. We are recording today's event, so if you want to listen again or share it with a colleague, you'll receive the recording within 24 hours. The console you're looking at can be customized, so feel free to move or resize the windows. The additional resources section contains the slide deck and other related links, and there are several ways to engage with presenters and fellow attendees today. First, please submit any questions you may have for the speakers in the Ask Questions box. Feel free to submit any troubleshooting questions there, and we'll be sure to help you out. Second, you can join our attendee chat by clicking on the icon at the bottom of your screen. We encourage you to introduce yourself, network, and discuss today's topic. We are offering 1 CPE credit for today's presentation. For those looking to receive CPE credit today, please note that you'll need to respond to at least 3 poll questions and be present for at least 50 minutes. Once you have met CPE requirements, your certificate will be available to download in the Earn Certification box on your screen. Your certificate will also be available in the post-event email. All right, let's meet today's presenters. We are joined today by 2 Avalara experts, Lauren and Andrea. Feel free to jump on in to introduce yourselves. Lauren, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Elsesser. I'm a senior property tax compliance specialist at Avalara. My background is in helping companies streamline their property tax compliance, specifically business personal property tax. I've worked with clients across different industries from retail to manufacturing who all share the same challenges: tracking assets, staying ahead of deadlines, and avoiding overpayments. I also have experience in real property assessment review and appeals, and for a number of years, I did the personal property returns for customers in the airline industry. I'm really looking forward to sharing how Avalara's managed services can help make this entire process simpler, more accurate, and more predictable for your team. I'll pass it off to Andrea.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Jaffe. I'm the Senior Director of Operations in the Professional Services Unit of Avalara in the Licensing Division. And my background is in all manner of compliance, starting out in tax and moving over to other types of compliance. So I am a CPA, and I've been in this space since 2011, working with companies to help them make sure that they are staying compliant with their business licenses, and also helping them through transactions like mergers and acquisitions and other situations like tax reorgs, et cetera, and how those types of transactions might affect their licensing situation. So again, like Lauren, looking forward to helping to sharing how we do things here and help our customers around the licensing challenges, pitfalls, and successes. I'd like to take a moment to just go over the agenda so that you know what we're going to hit, at least the highlights. We're going to talk about some compliance challenges, the real world risks, why managed services might be a good solution to help companies with risk management around both property tax and licensing compliance, the return on investment of a managed service solution, and then really go through some of the Avalara managed service options that we offer. And then, of course, we're going to have time for Q&A, hopefully, and we can answer your questions.
All right, and it looks like we have our first poll question. So the first question will appear to be able to answer here in just a moment, but the question is, how many locations does your company operate? So if you want to take a moment to answer, we have 1 to 10, 11 to 25, 26 to 50, and 50 plus. It will appear as a separate pop-up window, so if it's not showing on your end, you may need to just resize the windows. You can also click on the poll icon at the bottom of your screen and it'll come up as well. All right, and I'll move on to the results. All right, I'll pass it back over to you.
Okay, well, we have a lot of folks in the 1 to 10 bucket, and then we have, some larger companies with some larger footprints or more multiple locations. So from the licensing side, all these numbers are meaningful. You're going to have licenses, most likely one or more licenses in however many locations you operate, but this is good information for us to try to tailor the conversation.
Yeah, and for property tax, whether you have 1 to 10 properties or over 50 properties, we can really help you streamline that process and stay compliant in all areas. It doesn't matter really how many properties you have. Jurisdictional rules can vary across different towns within a county and of course between different states. So definitely good to know the audience we're dealing with today.
Okay, let's dive into the current compliance challenges. Giving you a little overview of what we are going to cover, at least brief understanding of what we're referencing here. So we really cover 3 types of business licenses. One is what is typically known as a business license, which is issued by a government authority to grant permission to do the business that you're in within their borders. We're actually tracking, I think there's a slide later on, we're tracking like 35,000 different issuing authorities for licenses and about 150 license types. So you can imagine the variation of that type of compliance burden. Another area that's often frequently included in the license compliance world are permits. And usually permits have to do with health and safety requirements. They're typically related to a physical site or a particular piece of land. So you were talking about sign permits, alarm permits, fire alarms, different things like that, boiler, et cetera, et cetera. And the last item that comes under the licensing umbrella are tax registrations. So not only do you have to file with the various government authorities to have permission to do the business that you're in their borders, but there's often tax compliance requirements. So we're talking potentially sales tax, payroll tax, income franchise, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the types of things that may be collectively called business licenses. Primarily, we're going to be focusing on the first one and maybe bleed over into the second, business licenses and permits. But Avalara does offer help and assistance around tax registrations as well, both sales tax and payroll tax. And you would go to your friendly neighborhood accountant to deal with your income tax and the other stuff. And of course, property tax. So that's something else that we handle. As far as business license compliance challenges, as mentioned a moment ago, we're talking about 35,000 different jurisdictions and different local jurisdictions, as well as 3,000 counties. And with that variation on the multiplicity of license types, so 150 different license types that we track, each one of those cities and counties, and often even states, have different requirements. They're going to have different prerequisites, and they're going to have different processes on how to achieve licensure and maintain the licensure. So there isn't a lot of similarity from one jurisdiction to another. They're kind of operating in their own, unique administrative framework, and that kind of variation really puts a burden on the compliance folks to try to figure out what's needed here versus what's needed there. The timing is often different. You're going to have licenses coming due at different times of the year. And of course, there are going to be changing requirements. So as things change in the business landscape, as new business activities become prevalent, those authorities are going to start wanting to issue licenses around those new business activities. And licensing in general is a way for different jurisdictions to raise revenue. It's kind of like a victimless tax. If you're a voter, you may not be so aware of how your local jurisdiction actually imposes tax or some kind of revenue generation on businesses, unless you're a local business owner. So it's a good way for cities, counties to raise revenue without the voters really recognizing that they're being taxed in some way. So this is it's kind of a vehicle for tax. And then there's also the enforcement burden. There's inspections. There's different compliance requirements that you may need to have monitored so that you can stay keep your license in good standing. And if you have changes within your business, like a new officer or a tax reorg going from Inc. to LLC or vice versa, or any kind of other ownership change, you may have some licensing impact, and that can become a burden to the folks that are just trying to do their day-to-day, month-to-month. All of a sudden, somebody in another area has made a business decision that's going to have some serious downstream licensing impact.
All right, for the next slide, let's talk a little bit about what are property taxes at a basic level between real property and personal property. So property taxes are assessed by local or state governments on real and personal property owned by a business. Real property typically includes the land in the building, while personal property may include equipment, furniture, or other tangible assets used in operations. These taxes help fund public services like schools and infrastructure and emergency services. And what's important to know is that property tax isn't just a one-time cost, it's recurring. So you need to be reporting your assets every single year and value them each year across multiple jurisdictions that each have their own forms and rules and deadlines. This complexity is where challenges start to surface. The process requires accurate tracking of assets. That's what's been purchased, disposed of, moved, or fully depreciated. And those changes directly affect how much a company owes in tax. So as we think about what property tax compliance really entails, from filing returns and reviewing assessments to managing payments and appeals, you can start to see why having a secured, consistent process is so critical. And that's exactly why Avalara's managed services comes in. So here we have an overview of the property tax cycle. And the property tax life cycle involves several key steps: filing returns, receiving assessment notices, managing appeals and audits, and then ultimately paying the tax bills. So right now we're in Q4, which is a really busy time for making tax bill payments. A lot of you on the call have probably seen them come in for payment in the next month or two. But after the first of the year, it's really time to start planning for your personal property returns, as the first returns are due on January 31st for North Carolina and Rhode Island. So the filing part of the process really amps up quickly. And what makes this really challenging is that every jurisdiction has its own rules and deadlines and reporting forms. So you could have a county in a state that has its own form, and if you report it on a wrong form, they completely kick out the return like it was never received at all, and you'll wind up getting a penalty. So we maintain all of those forms in our system and make sure that every form is reported correctly and on time. So, because of these varying jurisdictional deadlines, it's easy for compliance tasks to slip through the cracks. And our managed services help simplify this entire cycle, from preparing returns and tracking notices to handling payments and reporting. And this really gives you the visibility and confidence that every deadline is met accurately and on time. And so I'll pass it over to Jasmine for our next poll question.
Great, thank you. Excuse me. Okay, so the second poll question here, and as a reminder, we're going to have 4 today. You'll need to answer 3 out of the 4 for CPE credit. But the second question is, what is an example of a consequence for licensing or property tax non-compliance? And that window should appear on your screen to be able to answer. We have A, fines and penalties, B, resource drain, C, operational disruption, or D, reputational damage, or E, all of the above. All right, and let's check out the results. All right, Lauren, what do you think? Is what you expected?
Well, I think it's interesting that no one selected reputational damage. You'd be surprised. This is something that can definitely come up. We had a customer that never filed their personal property returns. They had no idea that they were required to do so, and they actually wound up on the news. And that's what prompted them to, start reaching out to companies to help them getting back on track and compliant. So we signed them up and they are completely compliant now. But reputational damage is definitely one of the risks of noncompliance for sure, along with all of the others. All right, for our next slide. So let's talk a little bit more about property tax noncompliance. And we're not just talking about missing a filing. There are very real financial and operational consequences that impact your business. The first and probably most common risk is overpayment due to errors. When asset data isn't accurate, maybe an item is misclassified or something that was sold or scraped is still on the books, a company can end up paying more tax than necessary. And those small errors add up quickly, especially across multiple sites or jurisdictions. And then, of course, there's resource drain. Many companies rely on small teams or even individual employees to manage dozens or hundreds of filings. And when those teams are constantly fixing errors or chasing down missing data or dealing with assessor questions, it leads to burnout and takes time away from strategic work that actually drives value. Costly penalties are another big one. Late or inaccurate filings can trigger fees and fines, and those are completely avoidable with the right process in place. And what's more, recurring errors can raise red flags with assessors, making audits more likely. And when things do escalate, you might see operational disruptions. For example, a tax lien or unresolved dispute with an assessor can affect your company's credit rating and hinder the sale or transfer of property or delay key business decisions. And then finally, one that often goes overlooked is missed appeal opportunities. When assessment notices aren't reviewed properly or promptly, you may lose the chance to dispute an overvaluation, which again means overpaying. So when we look at all of these risks together, overpayments, penalties, resource strain, and lost opportunities, it's easy to see why a more proactive, technology-driven approach makes most sense. This is where Avalara's managed services comes in, helping businesses stay compliant, avoiding costly surprises, and focusing their internal resources on growth instead of damage control.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, thank you. I think similarly with business licenses, you're talking about some similar potential consequences of noncompliance. So I just want to talk a little bit about fines and penalties. Many people don't realize some of the licenses that we're dealing with can be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. A lot of business licenses are flat fees. Some of them were born in the 1950s and 60s when $50 or $100 was a pretty significant amount of money. But as licensing evolved and as cities and towns began to use this, as I mentioned before, as a revenue driver, they also changed the way they impose license fees and started using a gross receipts-based concept. So not only are there a lot of different fee bases, so you can have a flat fee, you can have a fee based on number of employees, you can have a fee based on the value of inventory, or you can have a fee based on gross receipts. The gross receipts ones are really very, very significant in terms of the amount of money that you may owe, but also in terms of how much you may owe in penalties if that license is not paid for on time. We've seen penalties up to and including 100% of the fee. So the fines and penalties around licenses can be a very big financial risk and punishment, so to speak, in terms of license noncompliance. Business disruption is also very big. If you don't have your license renewed on time, you may be in a situation where the authorities will force a shutdown. So you can actually have your doors locked by the authority for noncompliance on a business license, and that goes into reputational damage. As you can imagine, you don't want people showing up on your at your front door to find it chained or to have a big sticker listing violations and reasons for closure. So business disruption is a big point to consider. Delayed expansion is another one. If you have a plan to open a new location, but your licenses are not submitted in time and coordinated with all the different departments that might be involved. So you can have the building department, you can have the health department, you can have the local county assessor, you can have the county clerk, you can have the town clerk, you can have multiple different departments or agencies involved in the various licensing activities. Some licenses might be prerequisites for others. So you have to know which licenses have to be issued first and the timeline for each license. And if all of that is not laid out very, very, consistently and carefully, you could be hit with the inability to open on your grand opening date. And that can be a loss of marketing dollars if you've, made a big splash and trying to say when you're going to be open. So again, everything around licensing carries risk even before you're open, but certainly when you're open. And similarly to the property tax side of things, there is a resource drain. Researching how to solve a problem and resolving compliance problems, even up to and including having to attend hearings, having your folks on the ground need to be away from the site or away from the location to have to deal with a compliance matter can really create some resource drain and potentially some business interruption just trying to run that business. So all of these are possible consequences for business license noncompliance. And again, similarly to everything else in the world, we're looking towards technology to help us make sure that we don't crash and burn on a licensing issue, and Avalara can help with that as well. So why managed services? This is the crux of the matter. What we both described is pretty intense, and maybe experts would be a good way to get through this. So, managed services for both business licenses and property taxes are really the way to bring experts into the door for you so that you can do whatever it is you do and whatever it is you're expert at, but you have some experts who can help with the paperwork, the licensing compliance, the property tax compliance, and handle that compliance function so that you can do the thing that you love or the business that you're in and not worry as much about the paperwork and all the administrative details around keeping the doors open. These are usually a combination, actually, of personnel, people who are experts, as well as tools and technology platforms that streamline workflows and provide reporting. So you still have visibility and transparency into what's going on, but you're actually not doing the heavy lifting. And again, there's a headcount burden. A lot of companies are worried about headcount. This is a way to get the resources you need without the headcount weight. Lauren, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, as you mentioned, headcount, it could cost, a good amount of money to even just bring one person over to manage the property tax compliance cycle in-house. But, for that cost, you can get a whole entire team at managed services to handle that for you. And it also eliminates the risk of turnover. If that one or two people on your in-house team leaves, that knowledge is lost and you're kind of left to pick up where they left off. But with, our services, you'll always have a dedicated team of experts handling your property tax needs. So that's another good reason to hand off your property tax compliance to managed services.
Absolutely. Okay, so why managed services on the business licensing side? Accelerating growth by scaling license compliance. So again, if you have that back office, if you will, of folks who are busy scurrying around getting your licenses in hand in time for your expansion or new locations, or even offering new products, if you have that team behind you, you can focus on sourcing, you can focus on the fit out of a location, and you have a support team behind you who's busy doing the actual compliance paperwork. And again, there's that expert function, you know, that subject matter expertise that's really critical. You may not have somebody that's really familiar with it. I can tell you that we see companies where the license compliance work bounces around from department to department. It can reside in the legal department. It can reside with the tax folks. It can reside with operations. It can reside with real estate. Nobody really wants to do it because they don't think it's their main job. But when you have a team behind you that this is all that we do, and we build expertise, that can really be a big boon to your business. And you gain the peace of mind that you have leaning on those experts. And of course, the experts should be indemnifying you for any late filings, things like that. So we do what we do very carefully to make sure that we don't have any chance of late filings, things like that. And of course, we want you to be doing the business that you're in so you can better use the resources that you have in-house to focus on your primary business, your business functions. And again, we represent a deep bench of specialists so that if there is something unusual going on in your business, you have people who can talk to you about strategy. One thing that I always like to say is we don't necessarily want the licensing tail to wag the business dog, but if you need some help around what are the licensing impacts going to be if you do X, Y, or Z, if you're having an officer change, if you're thinking about expanding into a new line of business, if you're looking at a tax reorg, anything like that, having a team to lean on to just deal with that, conceptually, strategically, is also very, very valuable.
Yeah, when it comes to property tax, managed services really helps to simplify what's traditionally a very manual and fragmented process. And with managed services, everything becomes centralized. So instead of spreadsheets and email threads, you have a single secure platform where your data, deadlines, and documents all live in one place. And automation and secure digital storage replaces manual, error-prone processes. And you gain real-time visibility into key dates like assessment notices and tax bill due dates. So there are no surprises, and the system keeps you informed and helps ensure that nothing slips through the cracks. It also reduces the burden on your internal team. So no more manually tracking filings or chasing down local assessors. Our specialists that handle that will give your staff time to focus on higher value projects. And then finally, because the process is standardized and data-driven, you can forecast and report more accurately, which supports better decision-making and long-term planning. So you're really not just outsourcing, you're actually increasing efficiency, improving accuracy, and gaining confidence that your property tax compliance is handled end-to-end. And because our team scales with your business, you're never limited by headcount or expertise during peak filing season. And so the next slide, when we look at property tax compliance, most of our challenges come down to complexity and consistency, especially for businesses managing multiple locations or jurisdictions. One of the biggest issues we see is inaccurate asset valuation. And when asset data isn't updated, maybe something's been sold, moved, or reclassified, the result can be overpaying taxes, or on the other hand, triggering an audit if values don't match what assessors expect. Our managed services help by reviewing and cleansing that data each year and to ensure filings are accurate and defensible to a possible audit. Another major pain point is how resource intensive the process can be.
We lost her audio, but we'll just give her a moment and see if it connects soon.
Submissions while also identifying appeal opportunities that can reduce your tax burden. Companies operating in multiple states, inconsistent tax treatment is a hidden problem. Different teams or locations might use different valuation models, which leads to unpredictable costs. And we standardize those processes across your footprint so you can get consistency and transparency. And then finally, there's the challenge of disorganized or outdated asset tracking. Many people rely on spreadsheets or old systems that don't talk to each other. And with Avalara, your data lives in a centralized auditable system. So it's ready for any jurisdiction at any time. So all of these issues, from valuation errors to missed deadlines, not only create compliance risks, they also drain valuable time and resources. And our managed services solves that by combining expert people with technology, turning a reactive process into a proactive, efficient, and scalable one. Andrew, I'll come back to you.
Thank you. On the business licensing side, talked a little bit before about missed renewals and filing deadlines. So using managed services, you're also dealing with a platform and a workflow tool that really helps make sure that those deadlines are not missed. Calendaring the upcoming filings, seeing what's needed, seeing which agency is involved. These are all ways that you can basically have visibility into what's happening and have your team behind you doing the actual work. But being able to run reports, being able to tell your CEOs, CFOs, all is in order, here's a report, here's what's coming due, all of that really helps avoid missing the renewals and filing deadlines. As I mentioned earlier, with 150 different license types, there's a lot of complexity when you want to grow your business. So I can give an example. We had a company that was in the cable television business, and they wanted to go into this alarm security monitoring business. They already had wire into people's homes, and they wanted to see how they could expand their business. And that was a completely new business activity that they had to quickly license as they were going into new geography. So even just thinking about expanding your reach or offering new products, even as a retailer, if you put food at a cash register, if you're a clothing store and all of a sudden you put food at a cash register, that's food licensing that you probably didn't even know you had to worry about. So any complexity from business growth that has some licensing exposure is something that a managed service team can assess for you, can share information with you, and make sure that we're getting the licenses in place on time so that you can roll out your new product, roll out your new service, grow the business through new locations, et cetera, et cetera. Tracking requirements across jurisdictions is part of that challenge. As I mentioned before, there isn't necessarily a lot of similarity from place to place, city to city, county to county, state to state. And so tracking the requirements across the jurisdiction is a job in and of itself, and having the right team and tools to help you do that really eliminates the need to manually look at everything, do proactive scouting out new rules and things like that. You can rely on the team who's doing that for you. And then, similarly in the property tax space, staff bandwidth constraints. If your licensing compliance work is not being bounced around from department to department, and you have a licensing lady, and that lady wins the lottery and leaves, all of a sudden you're up the creek. So having the staff bandwidth and consistent availability of trained staff is really a big plus with going with a managed service solution. You definitely want to offload the time-consuming tasks that we have. Even though we're all living in the digital age, I can tell you that a lot of the authorities are not quite with us yet. There's still a lot of paper to push. And so, you want to make sure that your staff is focusing on what it is that makes your business tick, and we can help with managing the paperwork behind that. Another challenge that we overcome is decentralizing compliance data. So think of an organization, think of a business that has 50 locations or even 500 locations, or how about 5,000 locations? If all of those licenses were managed locally at the location, you would have a pretty decentralized situation, and that is very common in the business world. One thing that I wanted to mention to layer in terms of complexity around licensing is the concept of service areas. Not only are licenses associated with physical locations, They are also associated with service areas. So if you're a contractor or you're a business that does delivery or you're a business that does some kind of installation, you may not have a physical location, but you're sending employees into different places, you're doing work in different places, you're delivering goods, or you're maintaining leases in different places. All of those might become a location from a licensing perspective. And similarly, if you have people who work from home, you might actually be creating nexus for a license requirement with your employees working from home. So these are all things that decentralizing license compliance is deadly. If you've got all different people managing different licenses in different locations or not managing the license because they don't even know they need one, having everything centralized and having a way to look over and review the licenses that you have is a big benefit. And then, of course, having the team actually do the work and gathering that, maintaining that, tracking that is an extra layer of security. Of course, we have a platform, and the platform really takes away the risk of lack of visibility and accountability. You have a team who's dedicated to your work. You have people who can swoop in to deal with any kind of unusual situation like that, rolling out that new product, but maintaining the day-to-day, month-to-month work is important, and transparency is important as well. So you can actually watch us doing the work for you, run those reports, get that input, get your, have a relationship with your account manager and make sure that they're speaking your language and have someone to hold accountable. We want to make sure that we're making the licensing process relatively easy, but also reliable and secure. I'm just going to go to the next slide. So when should you consider a managed service solution? You operate in multiple jurisdictions with varying license requirements, as I mentioned before. On the licensing side, we're talking about physical locations, just like we are on the property tax side. But we're both property tax and licensing, we're talking about folks working from home, for example. A company might have a laptop at home. That would be a property tax thing, but just having a salesperson generating revenue out of their home, that might make you liable with the multiple locations. Really understanding the concept of jurisdictions, how many different agencies are involved that you might be responsible to report to is important. Most locations, if you look at a rooftop of a location, you're talking about at least a city, state, county combination. And then we also have special purpose districts. So you have to even understand what jurisdictions, what authorities are involved. If you've missed renewal deadlines or you're struggling to track what you have in terms of obligation, that's a good reason to go out with to go for a managed service solution. Centralized visibility is another. If you don't have a good system, for example, if you're really working off of spreadsheets, or worse, you're working off a drawer with files in it, that's definitely something that you want to consolidate, and you want to have something that's accessible from multiple locations. You don't want to be stuck if you can't get your hands on a particular file. You want to have everything, accessible digitally, making sure you can track it from wherever you are, and making sure you have somebody behind you who's actually doing the work. But you really want to make sure that you're using the tools that are available to be able to leverage your time, or leverage our time really, to do the work on your behalf, but also still have control, visibility, able to report, so that you're the star shining in the eyes of your CFO or your CEO. As mentioned before, you're expanding into new locations and you don't really know exactly what you need to do in a given place. Leaning on a managed services team is the way to go for that. If you're spending a lot of time researching deadlines, researching forms, not really knowing who is involved, which are the jurisdictions that I need to be dealing with, which are the agencies I need to be dealing with. Do I need something from the Department of Health? Do I need something from the building department? Am I just talking to the city clerk, or are there other agencies involved? And that's going to depend on your business. If you're spending a lot of time trying to figure that out, that may be another real significant drain on your time and resources, and we can help with that. And then, of course, similarly to, missed renewals deadlines, if you're receiving notices or penalties or, enforcement actions, this is where you really want to beef up your security in terms of what your processes are. You do not want to be in a situation, both reputationally and business interruption wise, to be, struggling with passing inspections, not even knowing when the inspector might show up, being hit with penalties, being hit with notices flying in from all over. That's just a lot of extra administrative heartache that you don't really need and can really, create a lot of distraction. And then there's also that scalability. If you're going to be growing, you're going to be needing a team that's going to help you scale so that you don't have to consistently hire every time something new happens. And again, if there's something that's unusual, that's really not a day-to-day situation, like an M&A or like, some kind of change that's a one-time thing or, happens every few years, and you don't really have the bandwidth to deal with that, that's another good reason. If you see that on your horizon, that's another good reason to engage with a team that can help you, give you advice, give you some strategy pointers to consider, and really make sure that you have your ducks in a row so that when due diligence is happening on any one of those unusual events, you're prepared.
So when should a business start thinking about managed services for property tax? Typically, we'll see companies reach this point when internal teams are stretched thin. Maybe they're managing hundreds of filing or juggling multiple spreadsheets and still feeling like they're only one deadline away from a penalty. It's also common during periods or growth or change, like you mentioned in licenses, like for mergers, acquisitions, or rapid expansion into new states or locations. And each new jurisdiction adds a new rule or a new form or timeline, which can quickly overwhelm even experienced teams. Another sign is when you're relying on manual and error-prone processes like emailing spreadsheets back and forth or rekeying data into different systems. That's not scalable, and it increases the risk of inaccuracies and overpayments. Finally, if you're experienced staff turnover or lack the in-house expertise to stay current on every jurisdiction's requirement, that's when a managed service can make a huge difference. With Avalara's managed services, you're not losing control, you're gaining a partner. You still have the full visibility and oversight to the day-to-day work, which is handled by specialists who ensure everything is done accurately and on time. So let's talk about the ROI of managed services solutions. So what are some of the ROI impacts of using a managed service? So first, with managed services, companies will see a clear return through reduced labor costs because manual tracking, filing, and data entry is replaced with automation and expert oversight, essentially lowering the need for full-time internal staff to manage compliance tasks. That's going to free budget and headcount for higher value roles. Next is access to industry experts, where you leverage specialized knowledge and jurisdiction-specific experience that's difficult or costly to maintain in-house. And you also gain improved accuracy and compliance with expert-led processes and automation, which directly is going to reduce overpayments, penalties, and audit exposure. And that alone can save thousands of dollars each year. And next we have scalability during growth, where you'll avoid system and resource strain as your business enters new markets or increases asset volumes. And Andrea, I'll pass it over to you for the next 4 points.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. So just to touch on process efficiency and automation, certainly in both property tax and licensing world, there are a lot of moving parts. You might have somebody that is your property tax person or your licensing person, but you have to also realize there's other elements. If you have to get a check cut, that's accounts payable. If you have to deal with mailing, that's, the mailroom. So if you can turn all that over and consolidate all the different resources that you're using in the various departments, even on the smallest administrative tasks, and just turn that whole thing over to an outsourced resource, you really can save a lot in terms of process efficiency. And then, of course, we're all leaning into automation. And so you might not have the resources to invest in automation, but we've already done that for you. We have the tools. We invest in we're playing in the same sandbox. We invest in our sandbox all the time, and we want to make it as efficient as possible for our workers so that we're doing as much as we can for our customers in an efficient way, and automation is the wave of the future. Improve visibility and reporting. All of our tools have robust reporting capabilities so that you can customize reports, you can delegate the reports, you can automate them so that they appear in your inbox when you need them, or forwarded to folks who need information that don't really have a lot of hands-on licensing or property tax responsibilities. Cost avoidance for noncompliance. Obviously, we don't want to be spending our money on penalties. We don't want to be spending our money on trying to reopen closed stores, closed locations. We don't want to get hit with assessor penalties as well. Excuse me. And then, opportunity cost reduction. You don't want to use these people that you have that could be doing something more important for your business to be spending all their time on something that they, really is not a real profit-making or profit center for your business. So these are all the different ROI impacts. I just want to mention one thing to double click on what Lauren said about access to industry experts. We had a situation where a company was going through a tax reorg and had to apply for all of their tobacco and alcohol licenses in a bunch of states. And with our experts, we were able to negotiate for them streamlined application processes. So we got hundreds, if not maybe close to 1,000 licenses in a few different states by working with the authorities that we have relationships with. And we were able to save them tens of thousands of dollars and months of time in terms of getting those new licenses in place by consolidating the process, by negotiating with the authorities, and by working through a lot of the hairiness of trying to relicense a business. So these are all things that you might not really recognize, so we wanted to bring it to your attention.
Thank you. And we are on to our third poll question for today. The question, it'll appear here in just a moment on your screen, but the question is, have you ever been penalized for business license or property tax noncompliance? And so you should see that window pop up on your screen to be able to answer. Give you all a moment. And let's go ahead and forward on to the results. Oh, looks like we did not capture those questions. So let me just go back really quick. Hopefully it appears again to give you all a moment to answer. And if you feel that you were not able to answer a poll, go ahead and put it in the attendee chat or the Q&A section, and we'll be sure that you get your CPE credit for today. All right, so this time it worked. So yeah, what do you think? I don't know which of you want to touch on this or if we want to continue the presentation.
Yeah, I think everybody, we see a good number of yeses and a good number of I don't knows. I'm surprised at the no's, but that's good news for some of you, I guess. But yeah, I think, penalties will come if you're not doing your job right. So for all of those who said no, good on you.
Yeah, exactly. Good on you. So let's move on to our next slide, Avalara Managed Services Options. So now that we've talked about the why, let's look at why Avalara's property tax managed services actually include and how they work in practice. It really starts with data accuracy because every part of the property tax process depends on clean, reliable asset data. Our team reviews and reconciles your raw and historical records, reclassifies assets where needed, and ensures everything lines up correctly before filing even begins. That upfront accuracy helps reduce audit exposure and prevents costly overpayments. From there, we handle simplified filing. Avalara manages the preparation, printing, and submission of your personal property tax returns across all jurisdictions. That means no more juggling different forms or portal logins. We make sure returns are complete, consistent, and filed on time everywhere you operate. Another key part of the service is appeal management. Our specialists monitor assessment notices and identify potential appeal opportunities on your behalf. If something looks off, we'll flag it early so you can act strategically and potentially lower your tax burden. Then, once the assessment notices are finalized, Avalara supports timely payment of your property tax bills. We offer bill mail, tracking payment, and custom reporting, all with real-time visibility. So you can see exactly what's been paid, what's pending, and where every dollar is going. When you combine those elements, accurate data, streamlined filings, and proactive assessment review and timely payments, you'll get a full end-to-end solution that not only keeps you compliant, but also saves time, reduces costs, and eliminates stress during filing season. So instead of worrying about deadlines and details, you can have complete confidence that your property tax obligations are being managed by a team of experts who do this every day.
And on the license manager side, we also have this basically a system that, again, we use to manage your license portfolios, applications for new licenses, as well as renewals of existing licenses. So we call the managed services primarily the management of an existing portfolio, and then you can layer in professional services to deal with new applications, new licenses, different scenarios where you need some consulting. And the trained experts at Avalara are really here to help you get the licenses in place quickly, efficiently, as inexpensively as possible. Allows you to optimize internal resources. We will try to limit the amount of times we ping you. We consolidate all our data requests using a portal that you can watch us or not watch us do the work, but it's all accessible to you as you need it. We'll make sure that we consolidate our requests to you. We'll make sure that the payment situation is streamlined as much as possible by setting up an escrow account for you. And you'll be able to optimize your internal resources for other work. And obviously utilizing our licensing experts. This basically gives you access to folks who do licensing for a living and make sure that we make sure that we have all the current information from all the jurisdictions that we're tracking and monitoring. We use different methodology to keep up to date with all the changes that are going on in all those tens of thousands of jurisdictions, and also consistently train, have our folks go through training so that they're up on new business activities that are becoming prevalent, things like that. So you're able to utilize our licensing experts and reduce your compliance risk by using the tools that we have and the folks that we have using those tools. We're able to calendar your licenses, renew them on time, work with you to make sure you have the certificates that you need, land where they need to land for posting. So we'll handle all of the document management for you around licensing and allow you to enhance trackability so that you can see exactly what's happening at any given time with different workflows and different tools within our portal that will give you 24/7 visibility into what's happening with your license portfolio or any specific licenses on a given day at a given time, as well as prospectively looking forward to what's needed, down the road, next month, next 2 months, so that you can be prepared and you can, rally your internal resources if anything is needed from them to make sure that everything is running smoothly, no business interruption, and you can focus on other things. And I think with that, we have one last poll question.
Yes. So the question is, would you like for us to follow up with you after this webinar? Go ahead and put in your answer here. Be able to answer on the pop-up window. And then we'll get to Q&A afterwards. And so if you have a question for us and we're not able to get to it today, somebody will be reaching out following this webinar. But we do have some time to dive into some of these questions. And so if you haven't already, go ahead and make a selection on if you'd like somebody from our team to reach out. But I'll go ahead and get us started with Q&A. so the first question I have here is, how involved would my internal team need to be with a managed services option?
Okay, I'll start there. On the licensing side, we try to actually minimize the amount of time that we're taking from your team. As I mentioned before, we do need some interaction because there are a couple things that we will need from you to be able to manage your licenses. And that really revolves around information about the physical locations or some business facts. So when we're looking at your upcoming license renewals, we're going to aggregate all the information that we need, be it gross receipts, be it inventory value, consolidate everything into one data request. We try to do that once a month, and we send you that data request. You can act on that data request at your convenience and send it back to us. But we've depending on the size of your business, it's going to obviously factor into how much time you need to help us with the data. But we've kind of consolidated down our clients' involvement to maybe a day a month or 2 days a month, depending on how much data we need from them. And then on the finance side, we're looking to make sure that we have your funds available to pay the bills. So really decreasing the amount of time that our customers spend on licensing is the goal. And so we have really good tools to help you do that, to help us do that for you. And really, we've seen people drop from, literally weeks to days of time that they spend on licensing.
Yeah,
Lauren, you want to comment?
Thank you.
Yeah, for property tax at the start of the process, your internal team would help us by providing your asset data and sharing any business or location changes that could affect filings. And then after that, Avalara's property tax specialists take over the day-to-day tasks. We like to meet with our customers bi-weekly during implementation into our system to provide updates and address any questions, just to make sure implementation goes smoothly and we get all of the correct data in the system, as that's very important, as you can imagine. Then we decrease the meeting frequency once the implementation is complete and your team is comfortable with our system and processes. So whatever your team is most comfortable with, so we can meet monthly or quarterly, but it's up to you, however involved you would like to be. Once you're comfortable with our processes, it's up to you. But we'll always loop you in for key decisions like reviewing high valued assessments. But our goal is to free your team from the administrative burden while keeping you fully informed and confident in the process.
Nice little segue to the next question. It says here, how does Avalara ensure our data stays accurate?
Let me jump on that one. So obviously we have, security and data controls, but our goal is really to make sure that we're maintaining your data on a current basis. So we're constantly looking to see what's coming due and what information we already have on hand, and make sure that we're advancing through the licensing life cycle very carefully, prudently, and obviously on time. And also checking in with you to get that input from you. So we're collecting data from you. We will store it. Things that don't change, for example, square footage doesn't change. We'll ask you to supply that one time. We will store that data and we will use it as we need it. But our real goal is the data that is important to stay accurate are the license requirements and the licensing due dates. And again, you have that team to lean on who are constantly monitoring what's coming due and notices and website tracking from authorities to monitor announcements for new changes in the licensing world. So again, we have a team of folks and we have a lot of automated resources doing web crawling to make sure that we're up to date so that you're up to date.
Yeah, and for property tax.
Sorry.
Do we have time for me to answer? It looks like we're almost out of time.
Another minute. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. So for property tax, we ensure accuracy in three main ways. So first is through comprehensive data review and cleansing. And second, we use technology and automation to reduce human error, like Andrea said. And then third, we have experienced tax professionals who review the data before anything is filed. We know what assessors look for and help catch any issues before they come costly. So it's really a combination of automation, expert oversight, and ongoing data maintenance that really ensures the information we file is complete and correct.
Thank you so much for both of you for being here today. We appreciate your time. I'm just going to go over a couple other reminders here for you. We have a couple other webinars coming up, so if you'd like to register for those, feel free to visit our website. And if you did qualify for CPE credits today, and I will review those to see, if you were able to put in your answer in the chat today, I'll make sure you're able to download it by manually sending out an email if you're not able to. But your certificate will also be available in the post-event email if you don't see it on the console today. And so following this webinar, you'll also see a pop-up for a survey. So we'd appreciate your input there. But that concludes today's webinar. So thank you again to our presenters and to our audience for joining. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.